Welcome to another edition of Globetrotting 5. In this episode, we are going to analyze the sudden about turn in Trump's foreign policy. First week of 2026 has been quite something indeed. Trump managed to do the trifecta. First, as I mentioned in my previous episode, he picked up Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro from his presidential compound in Caracas. But if that wasn't enough, he followed this up with seizing of a Russian tanker, a Russian ghost ship in the North Atlantic. Third, he has revived talks of taking over Greenland once again. So all three put together have completely upended US foreign policy in the first week of the new year. So let us quickly analyze how these three actions are going. First, in Venezuela, after removing Nicolas Maduro, his vice president Delcy Rodriguez has taken over as the interim president. Now, Trump dismissed any notions of calling for the Venezuelan opposition to take over. He said that they are not ready to take over. And he said, in fact, that he would work with this new interim administration and protect US interests or further US interests through the new interim administration. So this is interesting because the United States doesn't have any presence on the ground in Venezuela. And the Venezuelan regime of Nicolas Maduro remains intact. The same leaders under Maduro, they are still there. The bureaucrats are still there. The Venezuelan army is still there. So the regime per se is still very much there on the ground in Venezuela. And yet Trump says that it is going to run Venezuela through pressure on this new interim administration in Caracas. Now, how is that going? Interestingly, it seems that it is working for Trump because this past week, the interim government in Venezuela actually started releasing political prisoners. On the other hand, it has opened dialogue with Washington to sort of renegotiate the bilateral relationship between US and Venezuela. Actually, well, to be very honest, there wasn't much of a relationship during Maduro's tenure. So these talks are essentially to sort of reset the ties, or whatever little ties that existed between the two countries, and sort of have a more favorable compact as a bilateral relationship between Venezuela and the US. It seems like on Venezuela, Trump is somehow managed to kind of get the upper hand, and things are actually at the moment working out for him. This plan of whisking away Maduro and forcing the interim government to reset ties and open up Venezuela to potential investments and business from the US. It at the moment it seems to be working, but we'll see how things play out. Now let's pivot to the second action that Trump took, which is the seizure of a Russian ship, a Russian ghost ship in the North Atlantic. Now this is really interesting because this ship, it was previously called the Bella One, then it was renamed as Marinera. This ship was actually on its way to Venezuela in December to pick up oil. Now, as you know, that the US was imposing a sort of an embargo on Venezuelan oil last month, and therefore when this ship was on its way to Venezuela, the US forces, US naval forces, they tried to interdict this ship. The ship refused to be boarded, and it bolted from the region and started heading towards the North Atlantic. The US didn't give up. They kept eyes on the ship, and they followed the ship into the North Atlantic. And midway during the voyage of the ship, which was earlier flying a Guyana flag, decided to switch flags, and it painted a Russian flag on its hull, and all of a sudden it was registered in the Russian shipping registry, and it was moving towards Russia actually, but the U.S. relocated its some of its naval assets to the UK, kept eyes on the ship, like I said, and then finally decided to board the ship and seize the ship. And this really took a lot of people by surprise, especially the Russians. The Russians were shocked because they thought that somehow by registering the ship as a Russian ship, the U.S. would not sort of take the step of seizing the ship. But that wasn't the case. And according to some reports that the Russians had actually started mobilizing some of their naval assets in the North Atlantic to sort of escort or guide the ship. But it seems that they were too late, and before that could happen, American commandos moved in, boarded the ship, and seized the ship. Now, this is a very big deal because this ship is essentially a ghost ship. It was being used by the Russians to lift oil, to transport sanctioned oil from Venezuela. Earlier, it was accused of transporting sanctioned Iranian oil. And now, since it was sort of registered in the Russian shipping registry, it is suspected that the Russians were also using it. So it was a sanctioned ship. So it was basically part of the Russian shadow fleet. Now this is important, as I said, because the Russian shadow fleet is what is allowing Russia to continue its oil trade and earn billions from its oil trade. Now, ever since the start of the full-scale Russia-Ukraine war in 2022, the Russian energy sector has been under sanctions and caps, and it has been facing, let's say, Western blocking in selling its oil and gas. Not completely, of course, because there are some European countries that continue to buy Russian energy. But yes, there were sanctions placed to make it difficult for Russia to sell its oil. But yet, Russia was getting the oil out thanks to its fleet of ghost ships, or the shadow fleet, because these are very old ships which are not insured, and they frequently change their flags, they frequently change their registry to evade detection or evade scrutiny, and they engage in ship to ship transfers at the high seas, on the high seas rather. So basically what happens is, this ghost ship and another legitimate ship, they meet on the high seas, somewhere in international waters, and they transfer the cargo from the ghost ship to the registered ship. And that's how the Russians are able to sort of recycle their oil. I mean, it's sanctioned oil, but through this ship to ship transfer, it is somehow made white and legitimate. And this is how Russia has been earning its billions in the oil trade, despite being sanctioned by the West. So if the US has decided to take action against the Russian shadow fleet, and according to statements from Washington, that is exactly what they intend to do, this is a game changer in terms of the Russia-Ukraine war, because if the US is able to stop these shadow fleet ships from plying, then it will certainly hit Russia's energy revenues. And without those energy revenues, Russia will not be able to sustain the war in Ukraine, because that is exactly what keeps the war in Ukraine going. The billions that Russia earns through its sale of oil and natural gas, that money is used to fund the Russian war chest and to keep Russia's war in Ukraine going. So it is in fact very, very essential that enough pressure is put on the Russian energy trade so that Russia does not have the revenues to continue the war in Ukraine. Because let's be very frank here, that Putin so far, despite all the opportunities that have been made available to him, all the off ramps that have been offered to him by Trump since he was re-elected. In 2025, Trump has met Putin. He's offered him a great deal to end the war in Ukraine, but Putin has not taken it. He has not taken it. And what emboldens him to continue this war in Ukraine are his energy revenues, because his shadow fleet ships are plying all over the world, and they're getting Russian oil out, sanctioned Russian oil out. So that's why Putin has not felt the pressure to go for a ceasefire or stop this war in Ukraine. So if US has finally decided to act against the ghost ships, it's a game changer, because this is going to embolden others in the Western Alliance, particularly the Europeans, to also go after these shadow fleet ships, and it could make a serious dent in Russia's energy revenues and therefore impact its ability to sustain the war in Ukraine. Let's pivot to the third item that Trump pushed this week, and that is, the talk about taking over Greenland. Now, you will recall that Trump had raised this issue last year after his re-election, when he said that he was keen on taking over Greenland. That conversation was there for a few weeks, but other things happened: Epstein files, other domestic issues in the US, and the conversation was buried. However, in the first week of the new year, with this turn to muscular American foreign policy, the talk of taking over Greenland has revived. And now Trump this time has made it clear that he wants Greenland one way or another. He said he could do it the easy way, or he could do it the hard way. The easy way would be to purchase Greenland. That's what some people are saying. The hard way is a military takeover. Now, this has sent alarm bells ringing in Europe, because, as you know, Greenland is actually sovereign territory of Denmark. And the Danes, like last year, they said that there is no way that they are willing to part with Greenland. And there have been statements from other European NATO members saying that they would actually defend Greenland if there is an attempt to forcibly take over the territory. Now, this is extraordinary because they're all part of NATO. And so some NATO members are saying that they're going to defend what is officially NATO territory from another NATO member. So that is like tricky, really tricky territory. But what is Trump's motivation here? Trump is positing this as a strategic security imperative for the US, because he said that, look, if we don't take over Greenland, Russia and China will, and we are not ready to have Russia and China as our neighbors. Now, this actually is in a way a fair point, because Russian and Chinese activity around Greenland has increased over the years, and with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, there is a chance that Russian ships and submarines and other naval assets could do something in Greenland. But the counter to that is there is already an American military presence in Greenland. There is an American military base in Greenland. In fact, there used to be many more before, but many of those bases were worn down by America itself. The point here is that the US and Denmark already have a military agreement, a defense agreement between them. So there is no reason for the US to actually physically take over Greenland, to have a greater military presence there. In fact, the Danes have said that we are open to having more American military presence in Greenland as part of a joint defense framework. So America any time can expand its military presence on Greenland through mutual agreement with the Danish government. So there is actually no need to physically take over Greenland or even buy Greenland. I mean, it doesn't make sense if the aim is to have a greater military presence in Greenland to deter China and Russia. What is happening here? Why is Trump constantly harping on taking over Greenland? Well, this is my theory. I think that there are two camps in the Trump administration, comprising his advisors. One camp, you have people like Steve Witkoff, Stephen Miller, and maybe Howard Lutnick. This camp essentially wants to further American commercial interests. So every foreign policy issue is viewed by this camp through the prism of expanding American commercial interests and business interests. On the other hand, you have another camp. You have Marco Rubio, you have Keith Kellogg, the US President's representative, or rather US President's envoy for Ukraine. These are much more seasoned people in American foreign policy, and they have a traditional view of foreign policy, not essentially driven by a commercial view. And if you see over the last year, these two camps have tussled against each other, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Gaza. These two camps have been sort of vying with each other for influence within the Trump administration. And I think that has finally led to a point where either camp is not willing to give ground, and therefore has somehow decided to work together on certain issues, which means marrying the commercial aspect with the strategic aspect of UN foreign policy. US foreign policy. So marrying the commercial aspect and the strategic aspect produces a very interesting result. Now let's look at what the Americans have done in the first week of this year itself. It goes and captures Maduro, and immediately Trump follows that up with the statement that the US wants Venezuela's oil, control over Venezuela's oil. So in one shot, you have achieved the strategic objective of removing the Venezuelan president, and you have opened the door for American access to Venezuelan oil, which is the commercial aspect. Second, you seize a Russian tanker, a ghost ship in the North Atlantic, thereby sending a clear message to Moscow that we are not going to tolerate your shadow fleet, which is helping you earn revenue, oil revenue, with which you are funding the war in Ukraine. At the same time, it is sending out a message that Russian oil is off limits, it's sanctioned, and we are going to make it difficult for Russia to sell its oil. Therefore, everyone should switch to American oil. So there comes the commercial aspect. So you have the strategic aspect of hitting at Russia's oil revenue, and you have the commercial aspect of forcing countries to switch to American oil, or buying American oil. Now with Greenland, again you have the same thing playing out. You have the strategic aspect of expanding US military presence on Greenland to deter Russia and China, and you have the commercial aspect of exploiting Greenland's supposed natural resources, because it is believed that Greenland has a lot of minerals and natural resources which can help fuel modern industry. And the US is also keen on that, because part of the Greenland conversation is that if they can get hold of Greenland, if they can take over Greenland, they can exploit the mineral resources of Greenland. So there comes again the commercial aspect. So the security aspect and the commercial aspect. So the two camps within the Trump administration, the Witkoffs, Stephen Millers, Howard Lutnick's, and the Rubio and the Keith Kellogg's, they seem to have sort of found a way to come to a common agenda or a common approach to US foreign policy that marries the commercial aspect with the strategic aspect, thereby producing a more muscular US foreign policy, which is more interventionist, strategic, and commercial. So it's a very, very interesting result, this marriage of the two camps within the US Trump administration. But having said that, we all know how fickle Trump is. This could also be nothing more than a political recalibration ahead of US midterm elections this year. Those midterm elections are very important, because if things go really bad for the Republicans and Trump, especially on given the domestic scenario in the US with the ICE raids, Epstein files, there seems to be already a split in Trump's MAGA support base. So if things go really south for the Republicans in the midterm polls, and the Republicans lose both houses of the US Congress, then that's it. That's game over for Trump. I mean, he'll not only be a lame duck president, I mean, there's a very good chance that he's going to be impeached again, and this time seriously by both houses of the US Congress. And that's it. Then Trump will be dead in the water. So this recalibration of US foreign, I keep saying UN, US foreign policy is maybe related to Trump's domestic electoral political situation, and he sees that his numbers are going down politically in the US, and therefore he thinks that this muscular approach, the rally around the flag approach, that may help his polling numbers going into the midterms later this year. Only time will tell if this strategy works. With that, I would like to end this episode of Globetrotting 5. See you in the next one.